Yuri was a regular old chill, until he had a Bruce Wayne moment and lost his parents in an accident. Since the economy sucks these days, he fired all his servants to live a peasant life when a 10x10 maid submits herself to work for him for free, making him sus but also weak in the knees because when has life ever been so kind to an orphan?
Housekeeping, you want me to jerk you off?
This is why he kept a close eye on the maid while she worked around the house, because he found it suspicious that she decided to work for him despite his circumstances and kept wondering if she was up to something. When she noticed him watching her, she approached him and asked if he was watching because he was curious about her, or if he's pulling a Jill Goldberg by memorizing her measurements to make her a dress or do worse things to her. Yuri was surprised by how accurate she was about his curiosity, and since he is as superstitious as my grandma on her deathbed, he accused her of being a mind reader. He admitted that he was so curious about her that he couldn't sleep at night because his mind kept going back to her. However, he wasn't sure if it was because of her bewitching eyes or because she'd come out of nowhere. After his rant, the maid offered to make him some tea to calm his nerves and he agreed. Later, he was in the study when the maid brought the tea, and while she poured it into the cup, he had an internal debate. He tried to make sense of why she'd come to work for him, and most especially why he'd hired her in the first place. When she looked up and saw him watching her, she smiled at him. That smile caught him off guard and made him wonder if he'd made a big mistake bringing her into his home. He recalled what happened in the days leading up to her arrival. The day before, he'd bid his butler and maids farewell. The trio had apologized for leaving him, but he assured them that he understood their reason. You see, his parents had recently passed away, and after inheriting their estate, he discovered they were actually buried under crippling debt, like all college students after taking out a student loan. Prompted him to dismiss all his servants as he had no way to pay them. Yuri knew leaving without servants would be hard, but he had no other choice and was determined to make his new situation work. The next day, he woke up feeling energized and ready to put in the work. He got dressed and then went downstairs to prepare breakfast, which got burnt because of his obvious lack of culinary skills. However, since he had no other option, he ate the charred remains of his breakfast and then went to do the laundry. This also failed as bad as my attempt to turn into a hottie because he put so much detergent into the machine that the room filled up with soap. Next, he tried to clean up his library, but that also ended badly, so he gave up and laid on the couch feeling tired. Just as he began to wonder if he was a burden on the resources of this world and a waste of space, his stomach began to growl. Since he'd concluded earlier in the day that he is what Gordon Ramsay would call an idiot sandwich,
What are you? An idiot sandwich.
Yuri decided to eat some cup noodles instead of trying to cook up a storm. After his meal, he began walking around the empty mansion, and the moment he stopped by the steps, the door opened. Yuri found himself staring at a purple-eyed maid who he was sure he'd never seen before, so he approached her. He asked who she was, but the girl ignored his question and told him she wanted to work for him. The girl told him that she was well aware that his only way of being rich enough to survive is if he opened an OF account.
Yeah, boy.
However, she was willing to work for him as long as he let her stay as a live-in maid, so he didn't have to worry about paying her. Yuri tried to refuse, but she pointed out that living alone in a house as big as that wasn't good. As she spoke, she moved closer to him and looked him in the eyes, causing Yuri to question where he'd seen her before. Her eyes mesmerized him so much that he forgot how to speak for a moment until she asked what his decision was. Yuri told her he would let her work for him, but if he discovered she wasn't good at her job, he'd fire her like the head of a big corporation that layoffs people for fun.
You're fired, and definitely you're fired.
In the present, Yuri told himself that he shouldn't have hired her, but he also couldn't deny that since she started working for him, things had improved. The house always sparkled after she cleaned it, his clothes were always washed and smelled nice, and every meal she made was delicious. Everything felt like a dream, and for some reason, Yuri thought she'd cast a spell on him. Granted, that was the most absurd thing he could have come up with, but since he only has 2 functioning brain cells that are also cooked, he chose to believe she was a witch. He wasted no time in accusing her of using magic, and stated that all the things she did weren't normal. He even added that her eyes were an unusual color for a human, so he was sure she wasn't one. The girl thought he sounded like a conspiracy theory YouTubers that make no sense, but since she didn't want him to make him feel like he's on the spectrum, she decided to play along. She told him that he was smart for noticing that she was a witch and admitted that she'd bewitched him with her eyes. Anyone else would have known she was messing with him, but not Yuri, who probably still believes that Santa Claus exists. He believed every word she uttered and said he finally understood why her beautiful eyes drew him in every time he looked at her. The maid was shocked by his outburst and quickly came up with a reason to leave the room because she was feeling overwhelmed. Later that day, Yuri watched the maid while she hung up the laundry because he hoped he could find clues to help him understand why she'd come to work for him. When she noticed him watching, she turned to ask if he'd finished his homework, but he ignored her question and asked what she was plotting. Instead of answering the question, she just smiled, making him insist that she had something in mind, but she told him that wasn't the case. She said she'd smiled because she found it cute that he was trying to be an off-brand version of Sherlock Holmes. Yuri argued that she was lying and went on to tell her that every time he saw her smile, his heart skipped a beat. He also said a bunch of other sweet stuff to her because whatever helps a man get laid at night in these tough times.
Oh, yeah, baby. Oh, yeah, baby.
However, we all know that Yuri's mom probably drank when she was pregnant with him, so he had no idea that his honest words were the reason his maid was looking like she suffers from blush blindness. When he insisted she tell him her motives for coming to work with him, she told him it wasn't the right time, which shocked him. That night, Yuri had a dream about his maid, and in that dream, she was dressed as an evil witch. She tried to get him to eat some food she'd prepared, but Yuri refused to take it, and when he screamed, he suddenly fell out of his bed. The passionate kiss between his butt and the floor made him realize he'd been dreaming, so he decided to go to the kitchen to get some water. When he got closer to the kitchen, he discovered the lights were on, so he became scared as he assumed someone had broken in. He thought of waking the maid up so she could help him out but decided not to when he realized that doing so would make him look like a total wuss. When he finally walked into the kitchen, he felt relieved to see his maid. She was standing in front of the stove with a book in her hand and was busy stirring the pot on the stove, which he found suspicious. However, he didn't let her know he was there and quietly shut the door before returning to bed. The next morning, Yuri went down for breakfast and as usual the food was delicious, but when he noticed one of the dishes resembled the one from his dream, he became suspicious. Immediately, he accused her of putting something in the food and let her know that he'd seen her in the kitchen the night before. The maid smiled mischievously and admitted to using a special ingredient called love. Yuri then accused her of trying to bewitch him and said her so-called love potion was the reason he couldn't stop thinking about her. The poor girl was left speechless as she didn't know how to explain to the toddler in the body of a man before her that she'd only been practicing her cooking the night before. Later that day, Yuri ran into his maid cleaning the windows in the hallway, and as he watched her clean, he realized he knew nothing about her. He had no idea where she came from, who she was, or even what her name was for that matter. Any sensible person would have asked these questions before hiring someone to work for them. However, when he decided to approach her and ask her about herself, she surprised him by addressing him by his name. He pointed out that she'd never done so before, and she told him there was nothing wrong with a servant addressing their master by their name. Yuri argued that there was and said if she did that it would make them look like a married couple. He said his parents called each other by name and were always very affectionate with one another, which made her blush. She had to excuse herself before she said anything, and after she left, Yuri began to wonder how she knew his name. He even went as far as thinking she had come to steal his information so she could sell it on the dark web or to criminals. Determined to learn more about her, Yuri went searching in the library for her resume and discovered that her name was Lilith. Later at the dinner table, Yuri anticipated that Lilith would address him by his name, but to his surprise, she called him Master instead. He then asked her to share more about herself and revealed that he knew her name, which surprised her. He told her that he would love to learn more about her, but declared wouldn't trust her for the time being. The next morning, Lilith woke up Yuri from his beauty sleep because even catching all those Z's can't make him pretty, and also because she needed to serve him breakfast. Before walking out, she left him a pair of pants because somebody gotta wear the pants in this relationship. During breakfast, someone rang the doorbell, so Lilith left to answer the door, leaving him to wonder who was at the door. When she returned, she brought back a box containing a gaming console, which is Yuri's version of a PS5, which he'd been dying to get for a while because what more could a man want from life? Yuri was so happy to finally have it until he realized it was a gift from Lilith. He recalled the new clothes she'd also gifted him and accused her of trying to control him by giving him gifts. Lilith smiled and told him he was correct, saying her ultimate goal was to tame him and make him hers. It was a very obvious joke, but the fact that Yuri has the intelligence of a piece of sponge didn't let him see it as what it was. He wasted no time in telling her that he couldn't be tamed and said that no woman could ever control the beast boy within him. He then surprised her when declared that if there was to be any taming done, he would be the one to tame her and make her his. His statement left her in a state of shock that all she could do was look at him until he asked her for more food. Later in the day, Yuri was in the library doing some homework when Lilith came in with some tea for him. A little while after that, she returned with some pastries, which he agreed to take. However, when she returned a few more times in under 5 minutes, he screamed at her. He told her she was disturbing him, so she apologized and explained that she was only trying to be useful to him. Realizing that she might be bored and lonely, he told her she could stay as long as she stayed still, like people doing the mannequin challenge in 2016. A few hours later, Lilith excused herself from the library to go handle some things. However, when she didn't return, Yuri went looking for her. When he got downstairs, he saw her going outside, so he went to the window to see what direction she would take. As soon as he saw her sneaking into the backyard like she's trying to hook up with her sneaky link there, he became suspicious and followed her. To his surprise, she was playing with a stray cat that had wandered into the garden. Yuri couldn't help but stare at her because of the way she smiled at the cat, and he told himself that she looked more beautiful. Lilith soon noticed him watching her like she's a kinetic sand play satisfying video, so she asked if he wanted to pet the cat. Yuri declined her offer and revealed that he was scared of cats. He even admitted that he'd been staring at her because she looked so beautiful while she played with the cat. However, he hadn't come closer because of his fear of cats. When he said this, he raised his voice, so the poor cat got spooked and began hissing at him since it saw him as a threat. He, of course, had no idea that was the case until Lilith explained it to him, so he told her he wanted to overcome his fear of cats. Lilith offered to help him, but he told her that he wanted to do it on his own, so she left him alone. He then tried using a stick of long grass to play with the cat, but the moment it jumped to catch it, Yuri got scared and fell. This spooked the cat, so it ran off to the other side of the house, but Yuri refused to give up until it eventually began playing with him. Lilith saw them from the upstairs window, so she came down with a plate of fish and suggested he feed the cat. While the cat ate, he got closer and tried to pet it, but stopped the moment a cat that appeared more like a skinwalker in disguise came up. Seeing him made Yuri almost wet his pants, so he fell on his butt in fear. However, the cat he'd been trying to play with began hissing at their new acquaintance. Yuri was genuinely surprised that the cat was trying to protect him, so he decided to stop being afraid and stood in front of it. He did this with his eyes closed and his arms outstretched, hoping it would scare the bigger cat off, and it did. Yuri was so relieved when he walked away and was happy when the white cat began licking him. Sometime later, Lilith returned home from the market and decided to check on Yuri to see if he'd made made progress with the cat. She found him petting the cat affectionately and told him it was impressive that he was able to overcome his fear within a short period. As she watched him pet the cat, she tried to ask him to pet her as well, but she got shy and tossed the idea into a garbage can. She then told the cat it was lucky to be petted by Yuri, which made him realize what she wanted. Before she could move, he reached out and began petting her head, saying how soft she felt. Embarrassed, Lilith quickly tried to leave but accidentally dropped a photo of Yuri, which surprised him. When he demanded to know where it came from, she admitted that she kept it so she could stare at him whenever she wanted. Yuri insisted that she look at him instead, saying his face card was stronger than that of a photo, but Lilith got so embarrassed that she ran away. After she left, his imagination began to run wild as he imagined she'd taken the photo so she could put a hex on him during a ritual. An hour later, Lilith returned to the backyard to call Yuri in for lunch, and she found him drawing the flowers that just bloomed. She tried to take a look at his drawing, but he hid it from her, saying it wasn't complete and promised to show it to her later. As usual, the meal was delicious, and when Yuri finished eating, he asked Lilith to teach him how to cook. This was because he wanted to find out what she did that made all the meals she prepared so delicious. After he told her this, Lilith was surprised, but what shocked her the most was when he announced that he wanted to marry her so he could eat her food every day. Seeing how determined he was to learn, Lilith agreed to teach him and suggested they make his favorite stew. They then went into the kitchen, and through Lilith's guidance, Yuri was able to prepare the stew. By the time they were done, it was already evening, so Yuri insisted that Lilith join him at the table for dinner. When Yuri tasted the food, he didn't like it as it tasted different from Lilith's cooking, but Lilith insisted it was delicious. He told her it wasn't, and pointed out that it didn't taste the same way. So Lilith told him it was because it was missing a special ingredient. Yuri immediately got up and said he knew she always added something to the food whenever she cooked. As soon as Lilith said the special ingredient which she added to all his meals was love, Yuri exclaimed loudly that it was obvious she had put love into every meal. He then asked if the reason her other chores were always so perfectly done was because she'd done them all with love. Before she could respond, he fired off another question. This time around, he asked how she was always filled with love for him. The question caused Lilith to blush intensely, so she covered her face with her hands in embarrassment and told him it was a secret. Later on, while Yuri took a bath and reminisced about the day he'd had, Lilith arranged the library. After she closed the curtains, she noticed the book he'd been using to draw flowers earlier lying on his table. Under the drawing was a note, in which Yuri had compared the flowers to her eyes, and that made her smile. When it was time for bed, Lilith made sure to help Yuri to bed, and after tucking him in, she bid him good night. Once she shut the door behind her, he began to wonder if she was Alexa the AI gone rogue, because he'd never seen her sleep before.
Alexa, fart.
He found it suspicious that she always woke up early and always stayed up late. This made him imagine her mixing a pot of what resembled a witch's brew. So he decided that he'd watch her sleep because that's the creepiest thing he could think of. A few moments after he made this decision, Yuri fell asleep and was snoring like my uncle who passes out after wolfing down the family dinner, so he had no idea Lilith came back into his room to pull an Uno reverse on him and watch him like a creep. A few days passed by and it was time for school to reopen. When Yuri was getting ready to leave, Lilith babied him by rearranging his tie, clothes, and hair because she knows that she has to mother this man-child. Her actions made Yuri remark that they looked like a married couple, and that made her blush so hard. When Yuri got to school, all he could think about was Lilith, and because he was so lost in thought, he didn't hear the other students talking about him. They all whispered about how he'd lost his parents and had to let go of his servants because he was now the beginning stage of an underdog story. Some even questioned how he was able to afford his tuition, but none of them was brave enough to walk up to him and ask. The only person who took an interest in him was a timid girl named Tsukasa, but she wasn't able to speak to him because their teacher walked in. During lunch, she wasn't able to speak with him either, so she decided to wait until after school. When school ended later that day, Yuri began making his way out of the school premises when he spotted Lilith. At the same time, Tsukasa spotted him and tried to approach him, but when she heard Lilith say she had come to take him home, she stopped in her tracks. She became curious about Lilith. She quickly hid behind a tree and watched them. She heard Yuri tell Lilith that she shouldn't have come, but Lilith insisted that it was her duty as his maid to ensure he got home safely. This made Tsukasa wonder if the rumors about him letting all his servants go were a lie, because she could see that Lilith was a maid. However, when Lilith asked Yuri if he was embarrassed about people finding out the kind of relationship they had, Tsukasa was shocked. While she tried to understand what sort of relationship they had, she heard Yuri say that Yuri is as flawless as my victory in Mortal Kombat, and he didn't want anyone else to lay eyes on her as she is alone. This statement made Tsukasa conclude that Yuri was hopelessly in love with Lilith and vice versa, reminding her of all the forbidden love books she'd read. Tsukasa decided not to disturb them as watching them was as interesting as watching paint dry. However, she was interrupted by her maid, Fujisaki, who told her she'd been looking everywhere for her. Tsukasa apologized and tried to explain what she'd been doing, but she couldn't get the words out. When Fujisaki noticed she kept looking behind her, she turned her attention towards that direction and saw Lilith and Yuri. At the same time, Lilith noticed them, so she approached them, and the first thing Fujisaki said made it clear that she and Lilith were already acquainted. Tsukasa looked between the two in surprise, but none of them offered an explanation, so she didn't ask questions. Lilith then thanked Tsukasa for looking out for Yuri and asked her to try and be friends with him so he didn't end up as the loner guy who decides to off all his classes. classmates one day. Tsukasa assured her that she would do as she requested, so Lilith thanked her and walked away with Yuri. As they disappeared from her line of sight, Tsukasa commented on how pretty Lilith looked in her outfit and tried to suggest that Fujisaki wear something similar instead of walking around like she's competing in a butch contest for lesbos. Fujisaki didn't even let her finish her statement and threatened to quit if she kept insisting she change her wardrobe. A few days later, Lilith finished her chores and decided to head to the market to do some last-minute shopping for dinner. In her rush, she left her phone on the kitchen counter, and when Yuri returned home, he was met by an empty house. At first, he thought she was hiding somewhere and waiting for the right moment to scare him, so he went looking for her. However, after he checked everywhere and couldn't find her, he realized that he had the house to himself, but it's too bad he has no chicks to invite over. He decided to take advantage of the situation and went ahead to stuff himself full of snacks while he read his favorite manga. Meanwhile, Lilith thought it would be a great idea to make a special dinner for Yuri using some soy fish, but every store she went to didn't have it. Refusing to give up and buy something else, she decided to go to the next town to see if she could source the fish, because she loves going on casual side quests. At home, Yuri finished his manga, and when he noticed it was already late, he began to wonder why Lilith hadn't called him to say she'd be late. As he sat on the couch, he realized that it was the first time since Lilith arrived at his doorsteps that he'd been alone. He couldn't help but feel lonely, and his mind began to wonder why Lilith hadn't left him a note or even called to say she'd be late. He then picked up the phone book so he could get her number, but when he called her, he discovered she'd left her phone at home. This made him more worried than before, as he had no idea if she was fine or not. At the same time, Lilith had just purchased the fish she'd been searching for, and when she noticed it was late, she decided to call Yuri. However, after she put her hand into her shopping bag to retrieve her phone, she discovered she hadn't brought it along with her. Knowing that Yuri would be worried sick, she rushed to the station so she could catch the next train. Unfortunately, the train was delayed, but thankfully Fujisaki, who had just left a bookstore, spotted her and offered her a ride. When the limo pulled up in front of Yuri's gate, Lilith got out of the car and thanked Fujisaki for dropping her off. After which, she rushed inside to look for Yuri. She found him sitting on the couch with a cat, and he had his face buried in a pillow. Lilith went to kneel before him so she could look him in the eye as she apologized for being late and not contacting him. To her surprise, Yuri accused her of placing a curse on him because he couldn't understand why he felt so sad while she was out. As tears pooled in his eyes, he told her that he didn't think he could live without her and begged her not to leave him. Lilith understood his fears, so she took his hands in hers and praised him for being able to manage on his own. Yuri's cheeks turned red, so he turned away from her shyly and told her that she wasn't allowed to go anywhere without letting him know. Lilith promised to do as he asked, and with that, the issue was resolved. But only after a few days, Lilith found herself in a tricky situation again. She felt Yuri's eyes literally digging into her like she's a piece of candy while she's cleaning the windows. Getting tense because she knows that he's soozing her out, Lilith hated the fact that his suspicions were preventing them from getting closer, so she decided to bridge the gap one way or another. As the day progressed, she watched and followed him everywhere, telling herself that it was her duty to make sure he was doing all right. However, he confronted her in the hallway and asked why she had been following him around all day as if he's selling tickets to a Coldplay concert. Since she couldn't come up with a reasonable excuse, she pointed out that he was always watching her as well. Yuri argued that her reasons for watching him were different from his, and after he told her he wouldn't let her find his weaknesses, he ran off. Lilith tried to run after him, but she accidentally tripped and was about to fall, so Yuri rushed towards her. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned, and Yuri accidentally ended up in a pillow fight with Lilith's cushions because he was shorter than Lilith. When they both fell to the floor, Lilith quickly moved off him and asked if he was hurt. Yuri assured her that he wasn't and told her that he would keep a close eye on her because she was a total klutz, and not in a cute way. A little while later, Lilith internally scolded herself for cutting off Yuri's air supply by giving him a magic hug that
It should have been me, not him!
Can heal any guy's trauma. She felt she'd made things worse between them, and Yuri wasn't helping matters because he kept watching her. This made her ask if he wasn't tired of staring at her while she worked, and he told her that he wasn't. He said she looked so beautiful every time she worked, so it was hard for him to tear his eyes away from her. His words surprised Lilith and caused her to lag in real time, so she excused herself. When she was in the safety of her room, she fell to her knees and contemplated how to turn things around. Later on, while she took down the laundry, she noticed Yuri watching her again, so she approached him. She then told him she understood his feelings, so the brainless dumb fudge asked how she knew he wanted to get to know her better. The thing is, Lilith had assumed he was watching her because he was suspicious of her, so his question caught her off guard and she didn't know how to respond. When she finished the laundry, she went to find Yuri and asked if he wanted to have fun with her. The way and manner in which she said it seemed to suggest that she was asking if he passed the vibe check for getting nasty, but Yuri has the attention span of a child watching YouTube shorts, so he didn't understand the assignment. Instead, he told her that he'd been having fun since she came to live with him. However, he accused her of trying to trick him, but Lilith assured him that it wasn't the case. She then suggested they play his favorite game, which was chess, so he could understand that she had no hidden agenda. This made him happy, as it had been a long time since he played chess. As they sat down to play, Yuri told her that his father had been the one to teach him how to play chess. As he spoke, he recalled the day he'd learned to play chess very clearly. He had tried to go to the library to ask his father to play with him, but his mother had stopped him, saying his dad was busy. When he began to pout, she suggested he join her in the kitchen to make some pudding. Yuri had told her he wasn't interested because his father always said his mother would have been a horror story on Hell's Kitchen. His mother had been upset by his words, so she vowed to make the best pudding ever and make her husband eat his words. Before she left his room, she told Yuri not to disturb his father, but Yuri ignored her instructions and went to the library. Seeing the look on his son's face prompted his father to leave his work and play with him for a while. He began teaching him what each chess piece was for and told him that the queen was the strongest one. This made Yuri ask if his mother was the strongest in their family, and his father laughed as he told him that she was. Just then, his mother walked in, and after she scolded Yuri for disobeying her orders, she scolded her husband for always indulging Yuri. After they both apologized and she forgave them, Yuri told his mother that his father had compared her to a chess queen. His father tried to play it off, saying he was just making an example, but his wife was so happy so he gave up. She then announced that the pudding was ready and asked them to join her for tea. In the present, Yuri told Lilith that he only got to play chess with his father a few more times after that, but he had enjoyed every minute of it. Lilith noticed he had a sad smile, so she promised to always play chess with him, which lifted his spirit. The next day, when Yuri returned home from school, he seemed unusually quiet and thoughtful, which left Lilith confused. She decided to make him some pudding since he'd talked about the pudding his mom made, hoping that would get him to speak. To her dismay, when she handed him the pudding, he didn't lash out or act like he was PMSing by dissing her intentions. Instead, he took the pudding, thanked her for it, and then went back into his room. Lilith was so shocked she began to wonder if there was something wrong with him. The next moment, the door to Yuri's room opened, and he held up a piece of paper, which had her thinking she was about to be fired. When she took it, she realized it was a notice for the open house day taking place at his school the next day. Yuri explained that he'd been quiet because he didn't know how to ask her to come to the school. This was because he was scared she wouldn't want to come since she wasn't his guardian, but Lilith told him she would gladly attend. The next day, Lilith stood before her mirror as she remembered Yuri's instructions that she wear something appropriate. She tried on different dresses, but none of them were appropriate for a school event, so she decided to ask Fujisaki for help. Meanwhile, Yuri was walking towards his class when he passed a couple who reminded him of his parents. He had told them about the open house day, hoping they would attend, but his parents said they couldn't as they were busy. Yuri had been alone that day, so he feared that the same thing would repeat itself and Lilith wouldn't show up. When classes began and all the parents filled the classroom, Yuri didn't see Lilith, so he began to doubt she would show up. Eventually, she did, and even though she was dressed like a butler, Yuri didn't care because he was happy to see her. When school ended later, Yuri and Lilith walked home together, and she apologized for arriving late. Yuri didn't respond, so she assumed something was wrong, but he surprised her when he ran ahead and turned to face her. With a smile so big, he thanked her for showing up and told her he was grateful to have her. Now we have Yuri practicing ninja runs up and down the hallway because that's what ADHD kids are advised to do to burn off their excess energy. Lilith, who had been watching, asked why he was running around like he had a squirrel in his pants, so he told her he was practicing for sports day. Lilith told him that running through the hallway wouldn't make him a subway surfer and offered to help him train. To his surprise, she began cheering, and when she realized Yuri was looking at her like she'd grown a second head, she switched to chill girl mode again. Shyly, she asked why he wasn't practicing, and he told her that it was because she looked too cute trying to cheer him on. He told her that as long as she kept cheering him on like that, he was sure he would win first place. However, he warned her not to do it on the day of the event because he didn't want others looking at her. The next day after school, Lilith met Yuri in front of the school gates and asked how his day went. Yuri admitted that he had no idea what was taught in class because his mind had been occupied with thoughts of her. This made Lilith tell him to do his best to focus during class so he didn't grow up to become a gamer who dwells in his mom's basement and listens to girlfriend ASMR to get an idea of what love feels like. As they began making their way home, they had no idea Tsukasa was watching them from behind a tree, and she was extremely happy to see them together. When Fujisaki found her watching them, she told Tsukasa that she was acting like a creep, but the stubborn girl insisted there was nothing wrong with what she was doing. She said Lilith and Yuri's relationship was so thrilling to watch and told her that it always gave her butterflies. When she asked Fujisaki why she couldn't be more like Lilith, who was gentle and sweet, Fujisaki told her to stop making stupid requests. After Lilith and Yuri returned home, she prepared some biscuits for him, and while he ate them, he told her they tasted great. Lilith thanked him for appreciating her work, and then held up a book, which turned out to be a carefully thought-out training plan for sports day. She told him she would help him train every day until the day of the event, and he excitedly thanked her. On the first night of his training, Yuri lay in bed exhausted, so Lilith offered to give him a massage to help relieve his sore muscles. Yuri agreed, and while she was doing the massage, he asked if there was anything he could do to please her as well. Now, if Lilith would have truly been a G, should have caught the hint that there's potential for unlocking a deluxe skin here. However, she wasn't like that, and only blushed because she felt embarrassed that he wished to return the favor. As the days progressed, Lilith kept her word and helped Yuri train for all the events he would participate in during the sports day. The day before the event, in Tsukasa's home, she went to Fujisaki's office and asked if she could sit with her for a while. Fujisaki agreed, but when she noticed Tsukasa looked upset, she asked what was wrong. Tsukasa sadly explained that her parents couldn't attend sports day because they were working, causing her to break down into tears. Fujisaki comforted Tsukasa and promised to attend the sports day in place of her parents, which made the girl very happy, so she hugged her. However, Tsukasa accidentally giggled while Fujisaki hugged her, which puzzled the maid, so she pulled back. The moment she did so, a bottle fell from Tsukasa's pocket, which made Fujisaki realize that Tsukasa had fooled her. The prankster prick had poured the contents of the bottle into her eyes to make it look like she'd been crying, so Fujisaki would feel pity for her. The next morning, Yuri woke up before his alarm went off, and after getting dressed, he found Lilith in the kitchen preparing lunch, so he decided not to bother her. Before he left the house later on, Lilith bid him farewell and told her to dress comfortably when coming to school. Later at school, the students gathered on the field for the opening remarks, after which the announcer asked them to get ready for the first event. Tsukasa noticed Yuri looked pumped for the games and was about to approach him when two boys beat her to it. They kicked and teased Yuri, calling him an NPC who's the poster child for bullying, and told him to make sure he didn't drag their class down. Tsukasa was shocked by their behavior, thinking Yuri would become affected by their words. To her surprise, he stood up to the bullies and proved that he'd finally grown into a man after all the rizzing up she'd been doing with him, as he threw several yo mama jokes their way.
So what do you guys want to do today? Hang out with your mom?
Tsukasa was impressed by his comeback, and when she heard Lilith cheering Yuri on, she realized Lilith was the source of his courage. She nearly lost her shit when Lilith promised to give Yuri a gift if he did well during the games. For reasons best known to the 24/7 ovulating maid, she began to imagine Lilith giving Yuri a striptease.
Yeah, boy.
This made her approach Yuri and promise to help him in whatever way she could so he could receive his supposedly lewd reward. The first event was the tug of war, and Tsukasa stayed by Yuri's side, encouraging him to work hard so they could win. After the game, Tsukasa told Yuri that since they won, he could receive his gift from Lilith, and he told her that he didn't want one. He said seeing Lilith smile was the only thing he was interested in, so that was why he made sure to win. While they were speaking, Lilith approached them and told Yuri how proud she was of him. Tsukasa found their interaction adorable and thought they made a great couple, but since she was so dramatic, she fell to her knees. While the games were going on, Fujisaki and Lilith stayed with the parents and guardians. When it was time for lunch, Lilith invited Tsukasa and Fujikasa to join them for lunch. While they ate, Lilith noticed Yuri looked sad, so she asked if something was wrong with him. He told her that he felt like he was inconveniencing her by asking her to come to his school functions when her main duty was to tend to the house. Lilith said she didn't mind because she enjoyed taking care of him and seeing him happy. The next moment, an announcement was made over the loudspeaker, inviting parents and guardians to participate in a race. Lilith decided to enter the race because Yuri begged her to, and as she stood with the other parents, she couldn't help but feel out of place. However, her determination to make Yuri proud was stronger, so she pushed ahead as the race began. At some point during the race, a parent accidentally bumped into her and nearly caused her to fall. Lilith would have given up had it not been for Yuri, who kept encouraging her to do her best. In the end, she won first place, and while Yuri congratulated her, some of the students began to grumble that a maid had won the race. They said she was unworthy to stand as an equal to their parents or guardians, but Yuri defended her. He told them to shove their unwanted opinions up their butts and announced that Lilith was his family, which surprised her. Next, when Lilith returned home from a grocery shopping trip, she was dripping from head to toe because it had started raining cats and dogs while she was out. Quickly drying her with a towel and telling her to take a bath, Yuri was blindsided when Lilith decided to tease him and asked if he wanted to take a bath with her, but Yuri told her they would only do that when they got married. Lilith was so shocked that he'd said something like that, but Yuri wasn't even fazed by it and walked away with a grocery bag. The next day, Lilith served Yuri tea, and the moment he took a sip, he spat it out, because instead of sugar, she added salt to the tea. Lilith apologized and took it away, promising to bring a fresh pit for him, but he couldn't help but wonder if something was wrong with her. This made him keep his eye on her as she worked, and he noticed she was cleaning oddly right before a book fell from a shelf onto her nose. Yuri rushed to her side, but Lilith told him she was doing fine even though she had a nosebleed. She then began walking away, mumbling something about needing to do the laundry, but she didn't get far because she fell to her knees in the hallway. Yuri rushed to her again and forced her into her room, where he put her to bed and took her temperature with a thermometer. When he discovered it was high, he insisted that she stay in bed for the rest of the day, saying he'd take care of her. However, he had no idea what to do, and as he began looking around her room for some pills, Lilith told him it was rude to snoop around a lady's room. Yuri was embarrassed after being caught in freaky mode, but he pushed it aside and told her to go back to bed. Lilith insisted she was fine and said she was still strong enough to do her chores. When she began walking away, Yuri grabbed her hand and said he wouldn't let her go. To his greatest surprise, Lilith started crying and admitted that she was afraid he'd send her away if she didn't do her duties. Yuri assured her that he wouldn't fire her for something that was out of her control and hugged her so she would stop crying. The next day, Lilith felt better and was outside hanging up laundry, but Yuri was still concerned about her health and asked how she was feeling. Lilith assured him that she was doing all right and apologized for inconveniencing him the day before. Yuri said he didn't mind and said he didn't like her being sick because it made him sad. His admission made her blush, and when he noticed it, he assumed she was still sick, but she assured him that it wasn't the case. Later on, while Lilith cleaned the windows, she noticed Yuri had joined her and tried to send him away, but he refused to go. He said working together would ensure that the work got done faster and admitted it was an excuse to spend more time with her. Immediately, the words left his mouth. Lilith's body sizzled up like the BBQ on the 4th of July, while her face went as red as the stop signs I always ignore while driving. As they made their way down the hallway, Lilith told Yuri they would make dinner after they finished sweeping. While she was still speaking, Yuri suddenly sneezed, causing Lilith to ask if he had gotten sick. He told her he was fine, attributing his sneezing to the sudden change in the weather, so she rushed to get him a blanket. After she draped it over his body, he took a good look at her as he wondered if she wasn't cold. For the first time since she began working for him, he asked why she always walked around like she's on the runway for Victoria's Secret fashion show. Lilith told him it was because she was hoping he'd get excited from staring at them for too long. But as expected, Yuri is too busy chatting up his imaginary friend, which is why he misses the hint. Instead, he took her hand in his and loudly exclaimed that she was cold before he draped the blanket over her shoulders.
Oh, no.
it. Lilith was surprised by his behavior and told herself that she liked him taking care of her. Yuri heard her say something, but when he asked her to repeat them, she refused and ran off. A few weeks later, Lilith and Yuri sat in the library discussing what kind of costume Yuri wanted for Halloween. This was because Tsukasa had invited them to a Halloween party at her house, and Lilith had offered to make Yuri's costume. He told her he wanted to be a mage, and when Lilith suggested he use a red or blue gem for his staff, he told her to use her favorite color instead. He then asked if she'd dress up as well, because Tsukasa had extended the invitation to her as well. Lilith didn't think it was appropriate, but Yuri managed to convince her that it would be a lot of fun, so she agreed. On the day of the party, Yuri and Lilith showed up dressed as a mage and a dragon respectively. When Tsukasa laid eyes on them, she gushed about how good they looked, and even made up a story about them. In her story, Lilith was a dragon who was feared by all because she had tried to destroy humans before. However, her stone-cold heart had softened after she fell in love with a human mage, and she swore to protect him with her life. While Tsukasa gushed about how her story was perfect, Fujisaki told her to stop feeding her crazy delusions at the expense of others. She immediately composed herself before she turned around and invited Yuri and Lilith inside for the party. The room they had made use of was filled with many Halloween decorations and enough pastries that would make me relapse into my binge-eating disorder. While they ate and talked, Tsukasa couldn't help but feel glad that she had planned the party, and as if he'd read her mind, Yuri thanked her for inviting them. Yuri also thanked Lilith for making his costume and asked why she had chosen green to be the color of the gem on his staff. Lilith told him she had picked the color green because it was warm and gentle, and also her favorite color. All the talk of costumes made Tsukasa turn her attention to Fujisaki, and before Fujisaki could react, she was whisked away by the other maids. When she returned, she was dressed as a princess, and Tsukasa gushed about how good she looked before insisting on a photo, much to Fujisali's horror. A few hours later, Yuri and Lilith left after thanking Tsukasa again for inviting them to her party. The next day at school, Tsukasa gave Yuri some of the pictures she had taken during the party, and he thanked her for it. She then asked why Lilith hadn't come to pick him up as usual, and he told her she had a lot of work to do. When he mentioned that he was rushing home to lend Lilith a hand, she was surprised as he was the first person she knew who helped their servants do chores. Yuri explained that it was because Lilith was the only maid he had, and that sometimes he helped her to reduce the workload. Meanwhile, Lilith was at home taking down the laundry when the postman called out to her saying she had a package. After she collected the package and letters, she began sorting through them and discovered a letter addressed to her. When Yuri arrived at the house, he met Lilith in the foyer, but the moment she saw him, she quickly hid the letter she was reading. Yuri found it suspicious and demanded to know what she was hiding, but she refused to show it to him, insisting that she would explain everything later. During dinner, Yuri couldn't help but feel something was bothering Lilith because the food was so bland and she hadn't spoken a word to him all night. Suddenly, she spoke up, telling him that she'd enjoyed every moment she spent working for him, and said she would be leaving the next day. Yuri asked why, and she told him that she had been asked to return to the place she was before she came to him. She admitted she'd left without her employer's permission, so she had to return and face the music. Yuri didn't like the idea of her leaving and insisted she stay, saying he hadn't gotten to know her yet, so she couldn't leave. When he admitted that he'd be lonely and miserable without her, she squeezed the letter and threw it away. She then told him she wasn't going anywhere, which filled him with so much happiness that he hugged her tightly, grateful that she was staying.
Yep, you're a lucky luck boy.
During the next week in Yuri's school, one of his teachers gave them the task to draw a graph of their day where they're asked to use different colors to indicate the activities performed in each hour of the day. While the teacher went around the class looking at what the students had drawn, Tsukasa noticed that Yuri's graph had only one color. During the break, she found him sitting outside lost in thought, so she approached him and asked what the problem was. Yuri told her he couldn't stop thinking about Lilith no matter how hard he tried, so this girl with no life of her own decided to listen to all he had to say. He told her that the first time Lilith came to work for him, he was both curious and suspicious about her. However, as time went on, he discovered that any time she crossed his mind, his chest would tighten up and his heart would beat faster. As he spoke, Tsukasa got so excited that she began bleeding from her nose, which made him worried, but she assured him that she was fine. She then asked what he thought of Lilith as a person, and he told her that although she was very beautiful, everything about her was suspicious. He couldn't understand why someone as lit as Lilith had decided to come work and live with a yapper like Yuri. He went ahead to list all of Lilith's good qualities and even admitted that the thought of her leaving him made him sad. All the mixed feelings he got whenever he was around Lilith always left him confused with more questions than answers. He then asked Tsukasa if that meant he was sick, which she found disappointing because she had assumed he was going to say his feelings meant he was in love with Lilith. In a final attempt to make him admit his feelings for Lilith, Tsukasa asked what the nature of his relationship with Lilith was. Yuri found the question confusing, which eventually made Tsukasa realize that she had been wasting her time in trying to make conversation with a guy who thinks the earth is flat. After deciding that Yuri had flexed his mid-intellect for ages, Tsukasa told him that what was going on with him wasn't an illness. She said everything he felt for Lilith was an indication that he loved her. And to no one's surprise, this guy didn't even grasp the concept of love, which makes me question what his parents were feeding him when they were alive, because the only nutrient in his body is protein. Kept trying to figure out what it meant as he walked home, and even when he got there, he was so lost in his thoughts that he just walked past Lilith. Lilith found it strange that he completely ignored her existence and tried to get him to acknowledge her presence by teasing him. However, nothing she did or said worked, and she began to fear that he wanted nothing to do with her. When he tried to walk into his room, she grabbed hold of his hand and asked if he was feeling sick. Yuri assured her that he was fine, and Lilith nearly let it slip that she didn't like him ignoring her. As soon as she realized what she almost uttered, she scolded herself because she didn't want to come off as clingy. When Yuri asked what the matter was, She lied and said she was worried about him, so he told her he had something on his mind. She asked what it was, but since Yuri is a beta male with the courage of Courage the Cowardly Dog to tell her he was trying to understand what love was, he said it was not important and walked away. The next day at school, he told Tsukasa that no matter how much he researched, he couldn't understand what love was. This made Tsukasa invite him to her house, saying she would teach him everything he needed to know about love since she was an expert at practicing how to give hikis on her own hand. When he arrived at her house later that day, he was greeted by the servants and Tsukasa introduced him to her mother. The entire process reminded Yuri of the time when his parents were still alive and he still had an array of servants at his beck and call. Before they headed out to the garden, Yuri handed Tsukasa the cookies Lilith had made for her and she thanked him. In the garden, they had tea and biscuits, and Tsukasa asked Yuri why Lilith hadn't come along with him to her house. He told her that Lilith had escorted him, but said he'd asked her to return home when they were halfway to her house. Tsukasa thought it was a shame that Lilith was missing out on the fun, so she suggested they send a car to pick her up. To her surprise, Yuri admitted that he was scared that Lilith would decide to leave his mansion and come work for her family if he brought her there. He said Tsukasa had everything he'd lost, and if Lilith decided to work for her family, she would earn more than he could ever afford to pay her. What he feared the most was that he could never make Lilith happy, but he didn't let Tsukasa know that. Tsukasa then told him that Lilith would never leave him because she always smiled and looked happy when she was with him. This revelation made him happy, and Tsukasa tried her best to contain her happy squeals. When Yuri asked if everything was okay, she changed the topic and reminded him that they had met up to discuss love. The next moment, she pulled out a stack of romance novels from under the table and told Yuri that reading them might help him understand love. Suddenly, the books were taken away from her by Fujisaki, who told her that if her father found out she'd taken the books from the library, he would scold her. Tsukasa tried to convince Fujisaki to let her have the books, but the maid refused and began walking away, ignoring the whiny little brat desperately clinging to her arm. Later that day, when Yuri got home, Lilith welcomed him with a smile as usual, and it made him remember what Tsukas had told him. A few days later, the art teacher gave Yuri's class an assignment to draw something they liked after carefully observing it. When Yuri got him that day, he asked Lilith for permission to draw a picture of her for his art project, and she agreed. Before he began drawing, he pointed out some of her unique features, which had Lilith turning red like a litmus paper that's been dipped in acid. When she recovered from her shy girl era, she suggested that she pose for the picture. She did a few different poses and asked which he preferred, but Yuri surprised her by saying he wanted to draw her as she was. Immediately, the words left his mouth. The thirsty maid started to imagine that he wanted to draw her like one of his French girls like in Titanic. In the end, he asked her to sit in a chair while he worked on the drawing, and when he finished, Lilith praised him for a job well done. However, Yuri wasn't impressed with it and told her that he failed to capture her true beauty, so he erased the drawing. The next morning, Yuri resembled my PE teacher post-hangover because he had dark circles under his eyes and looked very tired. He told Lilith that he had been unable to sleep because he was worried he would do justice to her beauty with his drawing. This made her assure him that she would do everything in her power to see that he slept well that night. The first thing she did was light a scented candle, hoping the smell would help him fall asleep. But Yuri told her that the only thing he wanted to smell was her, as she smelled better. She then suggested that he lay his head on her legs until he fell asleep, so that way he got to breathe in her scent. Yuri declined, saying that if he did that, her legs would go numb and he wouldn't be able to sleep because he'd feel guilty. Since that option was out, she gave him some warm milk, put on some soothing music, and then gave him a hot eye mask. Unfortunately, none of these were able to make him fall asleep, so he asked if she could lay next to him on the bed. As she lay beside him, Yuri admitted that he wanted to know more about him, and said he knew there were things she hadn't told him yet. Instead of confirming or denying what he said, Lilith began singing a lullaby, and as he drifted to sleep, Yuri recalled that the song sounded familiar. The next day, Yuri woke up feeling very energetic and he thanked Lilith for helping him sleep. After having breakfast, he went ahead to finish his drawing, and when he presented it at school, he was given a trophy for having the best work. Since this guy can't seem to keep his hormones in check, Yuri's dreams got a cameo from a purple-haired girl who had been his playdate growing up, but because his brain focuses more on bodies than faces, he never got to see the face of his childhood bestie. When he opened his eyes, he saw the girl standing next to his window, but upon closer inspection, he realized it was Lilith. He then asked why she had bothered to come wake him up when it was her day off. Lilith told him that she did it because she couldn't ignore her morning duties, and as if on cue, Yuri's stomach growled. Lilith then left to prepare breakfast, while Yuri remained in bed as he tried to figure out who the girl from his dream was. Later that day, Yuri was in the library doing his assignments when Lilith walked in wearing casual clothes. Seeing her in something other than her uniform surprised him, so he accidentally dropped his pencil. The first thing that came to his mind was that she was going on a date, but he didn't try to find out if his suspicions were true or not. Before leaving, Lilith helped him pick up his pencil and asked if he would be alright without her. He assured her that he wasn't a baby and told her to enjoy the rest of her day without worrying about him. As she walked into town, Lilith decided to take a stroll since she was a bit early for her meeting. The next moment, a sweet aroma caught her attention, so she followed the smell and ended up in a pastry store. There were so many delicious-looking pastries that she had a hard time deciding which one she wanted to buy. The shop owner offered her a free sample, and while she ate it, she sensed someone watching her. She immediately turned around, but when she didn't see anything out of the ordinary, she brushed the feeling aside. After leaving the shop with her purchase, she made her way to a nearby cafe where thoughts of Yuri occupied her mind, as she wondered how he was managing alone. A little while later, Fujisaki joined her at her table and after placing her order asked Lilith why she looked so worried on her day off. Lilith told her she was thinking about Yuri and asked Fujisaki if she ever got worried about Tsukasa. Fujisaki told her no, but Lilith didn't believe her and said that she'd changed a lot from the always in her luteal phase biat she once knew. She said taking care of Tsukasa must have softened her heart a bit, and that made Fujisaki blush even though she tried to hide it. Since was feeling embarrassed, she told Lilith to stop talking about it. So Lilith asked for advice on how to get closer to Yuri. Fujisaki told her that if she hoped to have any relationship with Yuri, she first had to open up to him. Lilith admitted that she wasn't sure she could do it as she was scared Yuri wouldn't understand her. Fujisaki kept quiet for a while and then pointed out that Lilith had changed from the unapproachable loner she went to school with. Before Lilith could respond, Fujisaki's phone began pinging from all the messages Tsukasa was sending to her. The nosy girl wanted to know what they were discussing and asked Fujisaki to take a picture with Lilith. Fujisaki wasn't ready to feed her crazy obsessions, so she told Lilith that she had to leave because Tsukasa needed her. As she stood up to leave, she told Lilith that it was the right time to speak to Yuri about her past. When she walked away, she passed by the table Yuri was sitting at, but had no idea he was the one. The truth is, Yuri had been so curious about what Lilith planned to do on her day off, so he followed her like some detective. Now that he'd heard Lilith's discussion with Fujisaki, he couldn't help but wonder what secret Lilith was hiding. While he pondered the issue, a baby began crying somewhere in the cafe, so its mother started singing the same lullaby Lilith had sung to him some nights before. Listening to the woman sing seemed to trigger a memory in Yuri. So later that day when Lilith returned home, he confronted her. Yuri admitted that he'd followed her because he was curious, but was surprised to hear her conversation with Fujisaki. He then asked if the secret Fujisaki was referring to was about the time she met him in the past when he was still very young. Lilith was surprised and asked how he knew. So he explained that he remembered a time from his childhood when his parents brought a young girl to the mansion. Even though the girl looked different from Lilith, he was sure they were the same person. Lilith told him that his suspicions were correct, so he angrily asked why she'd kept something so important a secret all the time she'd been with him. She told him that she was afraid he wouldn't believe her, so she had hoped he would remember their past together if she stayed by his side. As she spoke, she held her hands in front of her, so Yuri held onto them and swore that he would try to remember their past. He also told her not to be sad because seeing her that way broke his heart. The next morning, Lilith went to wake Yuri up but found his bed as empty as he already had his rise and shine moment with Kylie Jenner.
Rise and shine.
So she went looking for him. Eventually, she found him in the backyard kneeling next to the flower beds, and when she called out to him, he asked her to hold out her hand. When she did, he placed the flower ring he made in it, which made her freak out a little until he explained that he was hoping to remember his past. Lilith realized he was retracing his footsteps to the day they had both been playing in the garden, and he had given her the flower ring. She tried to talk about it but remembered he had school, so he suggested they speak later when he returned from school. While he was at school, Lilith found a way to preserve her flower ring so it wouldn't wither. After classes that day, Tsukasa bombarded him with questions about how his relationship with Lilith was progressing. She was very desperate for any detail he could, seeing as this is as close as she will ever get to touching a man. Her questions made Yuri realize that he'd completely forgotten about his quest to learn about love because of everything that had happened. However, he told Tsukasa they had slept together, which shocked her, but she managed to recover quickly and asked when he had confessed to Lilith. Yuri had no idea what she was talking about, so she called him a man-ho for demolishing Lilith's lily pads without confessing his feelings for her. Yee! She said that he should have told Lilith he was in love with her, but he told her he didn't know what love was. Tsukasa then explained that everything he felt for Lilith was love. Yuri thought back to everything that had happened between him and Lilith, and as soon as he realized Tsukasa was right, he ran out of the classroom. Yuri immediately hurried home, and even though he was breathless, he still managed to confess his love to Lilith. He began by saying he liked everything about her, even her quirks, so she dropped her broom and was about to respond to his confession when she was interrupted. The cause of the interruption was Natsume, an annoying maid who's known for serving yappuccinos nobody ordered, who demanded that Lilith return with her immediately. Lilith was too stunned to speak at this, but they brought her inside the house and gave her tea before Lilith introduced her to Yuri. Just as she said Natsume was her former classmate and colleague, Natsume cut her off and demanded she return home. She said she'd sent a letter to Lilith asking her to return, and since she didn't, she came to take her back herself. Lilith reminded her that she had sent a letter in which she clearly stated she would not return, but Natsume refused to listen. She argued that Yuri had nothing to offer Lilith and said he was exploiting her because he had no money to pay her with. Yuri told her that she couldn't take Lilith as she was his maid, and said that he wanted to know how Lilith felt about him. His melodramatic soft-serve Oscar speech didn't faze Natsume, who said that Lilith would be better off where she could earn more money. She told Yuri that he had nothing to offer Lilith, but Lilith cut her off saying she decided to remain by Yuri's side, so she didn't care if he paid her or not. She told Natsume that not even all the flavors of buldak ramen would make her turn her back on Yuri. This angered Natsume, and she angrily said Lilith was a fool for choosing a malnutrition teenage dirtbag over her. Yuri felt hurt by her insult, so Lilith warned Natsume to watch her tone and speak to him respectfully. Realizing that Lilith wouldn't change her mind, Natsume declared that she would test Yuri to find out if he was worthy of being Lilith's master. The first thing she did was ask him to explain the theory of relativity to her, and Yuri admitted that he had no idea what it was. Natsume began to mock him for not knowing it, so he threw the question back at her. Unlike Yuri, who admitted he didn't know the answer, Natsume pretended to be knowledgeable on the topic and said a whole lot of nonsense. Since neither Yuri nor Lilith knew this, they didn't call her out for her lies, and Yuri promised to study hard so he could become as smart as her. Natsume still refused to cut him some slack, so she asked if he had money, so Yuri told her that he hasn't been making money moves because he's not Cardi B. This made her happy, as she told him that a good master was someone who knew how to save and manage his money. Her statement made bring out his piggy bank, which he used to save his allowance every month so he could buy a gift for Lilith. Lilith was moved by his dedication, and since Natsume didn't want to be left out, she told them she also had some money. However, when she put her hands in her pocket, she came up empty, so Lilith teased her about her spending habits. Annoyed, Natsume tried to defend herself but accidentally knocked over a lamp, causing it to break. Yuri quickly rushed to check on Natsume to ensure that she wasn't hurt while Lilith went to get a broom. Natsume was surprised by Yuri's kindness, and when she asked why he wasn't mad at her, he said it was because she was Lilith's guest, and added that it had been an accident. When Lilith returned with the broom, Natsume warned her to be wary of Yuri, accusing him of using nice words to manipulate her. However, Lilith didn't appreciate the way she spoke about Yuri, so she told Natsume never to speak ill of her master. Still, Natsume argued that everything she did was for Lilith's sake, so Lilith asked why she was so obsessed with her. She stated that even when they were in school, Natsume always found a reason to be close to her. Natsume said nothing, so Lilith thanked her for trying to look out for her but told her to keep her opinions to herself.
Turn that some sideways and stick it straight up.
As Natsume shook in anger, Yuri recalled what Tsukasa had once told him about the way people express their love. This made him ask Natsume if she loved Lilith, and she immediately denied it. Yuri calls her out on how much she sucks at lying, and made references to everything she'd done and said since she arrived, stating that it was all because she loved Lilith. Natsume told him he was being delusional, so he told her that just like how she wanted Lilith to go home with her, he wanted Lilith to stay. However, he wasn't ashamed to admit it was because he loved her. Natsume was shocked by Yuri's boldness, but eventually, she stopped arguing and admitted that she did love Lilith. She said she'd been worried sick about her well-being since she left, which was why she tracked her down, hoping to get her to return home. Lilith apologized for making her worry, but still told her that she had no plans whatsoever to return home with her. The next day, after Yuri was at school, Lilith decided to tidy up the house, and when Natsume offered to help, Lilith said no because she was a guest. However, Natsume stubbornly stayed by Lilith's side as she worked, and when she was done, Natsume asked if she didn't get exhausted from doing all the house chores alone. Lilith said that she didn't see it as a burden, as she was willing to do a lot for her master's sake. After Lilith left to start preparing dinner, Natsume told herself that she didn't like Yuri as he was the reason Lilith was acting the way she did. When Yuri returned from school later on, the first thing he did was tell Lilith that he'd missed her. Both girls were shocked when he admitted that Lilith was all he could think about at school, so as soon as school was over, he ran back home. Natsume couldn't help but remember her master as watched Lilith tell Yuri to be careful next time, and when Lilith asked why she looked so serious, she assured her that everything was fine. After Yuri got changed, he went to the kitchen and asked Lilith if she needed help with the cooking, and she said no. He then went to the dining room to sit with Natsume, who was busy eating chips. When she noticed him staring at her, she told him to leave some things about her up to his imagination, forgetting that his brain isn't even capable of forming proper sentences, let alone imagine things. He did, however, say he didn't think she was a maid because she acted more grungy like a teen in their rebellious phase. Natsume argued that she was a maid and tried to prove it by helping Lilith in the kitchen, but that ended in disaster. Refusing to give up, she attempted to help with the laundry and sweeping, but they ended badly as well. Yuri then asked her to let Lilith handle the chores alone, but the stubborn girl refused to listen. She picked up a bucket of water, but since she accidentally spilled some of it, she slipped on the water and fell. The water in the bucket ended up on both her and Lilith, so Yuri suggested they take a bath so they could avoid getting sick. While the girls bathed, Lilith confessed that Natsume's presence helped distract her from her mixed feelings. She said she hadn't expected Yuri to confess to her all of a sudden, so she didn't know how to respond. Natsume told her there was nothing to think about, and pointed out that she looked happy being with Yuri, which surprised her. Not long after, Lilith went looking for Natsume, and when she saw an open magazine lying on the table, she automatically assumed that Natsume had gone out. Meanwhile, Tsukasa asked Yuri if he'd finally confessed to Lilith, and he told her that he had, which made her happy. He also told her that things at the house had gotten very lively since they had a new family member. Tsukasa immediately assumed he was referring to a baby. But after Yuri explained things to her, she changed her mind. She insisted that Natsume was Yuri's love rival and said she was a necessary addition to strengthen his relationship with Lilith. As they walked towards the gate, Natsume, who had come to pick up Yuri, spotted them. She immediately assumed Yuri to be a two-timing, cheap, lying wannabe and was about to confront him when Fujisaki walked past her. The moment she recognized her, she remembered Fujisaki had been famous at the academy for being a bully, so she stayed back. She remained in her spot until Fujisaki dragged Tsukasa away, and Yuri approached her, asking why she was at his school. She told him she'd come to take him home, and as they walked home, she asked who Tsukasa was, so he explained their relationship to her. As they continued on their way, Natsume told Yuri she would return home soon and asked for his help to get Lilith a gift. However, when she turned to face him, she noticed he wasn't beside her, so she turned around because she heard his voice. She saw him confronting some boys who accused him of bumping into them and causing one of them to drop his bun. Yuri told them he'd done nothing wrong and pointed out that they had been the ones to bump into him. This annoyed the boys, so one of them tried to punch him in the face, but he couldn't do so as Natsume intervened. One word from her and both boys ran away like they were chasing a Black Friday sale. Natsume then commended Yuri for standing up to them, but advised him to be careful the next time he found himself in a similar situation. Yuri thanked her for her help and asked if there was anything he could do to repay her. Natsume told him there was, so after they got home, they went up to his room to discuss. Lilith found it strange that the two of them were getting along like old friends, but she was happy about it. When she went up to bring them some tea, she found the pair arguing over what outfit suited her the most, so she quietly closed the door and left. The sound of the door clicking made them stop, and then they began discussing the real issue at hand, a surprise Christmas party for Lilith. Natsume had told Yuri she wanted to host the party to thank Lilith, so he agreed to go along with her plan to make it work. The plan was simple. He would tell Lilith that Tsukasa invited him for a Christmas party, after which Natsume would suggest they go shopping to pass the time. After the first phase of the plan worked out, Yuri asked Tsukasa to help him with the planning of the party, and she happily agreed. Even so, she believed Yuri should take Lilith out on a romantic date to celebrate Christmas. On the day of the party, Lilith was reluctant to leave Yuri alone, but he assured her that he would be fine. Soon after she left with Natsume, Tsukasa and Fujisaki arrived to help Yuri decorate the house. Tsukasa was placed on decoration duty, while Yuri and Fujisaki went to the kitchen to bake the cake and prepare the food. When Yuri was done frosting the cake, Fujisaki noticed he had some cream in his nose, so she wiped it away with a cloth. Yuri thanked her, but she told him he didn't have to, as it was something she always did for Tsukasa. So Yuri declared that she must truly love Tsukasa. Fujisaki tried to deny it, but she was cut off by the sound of a camera clicking. When she realized Tsukasa had taken a picture, she confiscated the camera and refused to give it back despite her pleas. In the end, she felt bad, so she asked Tsukasa to help Yuri complete the cake decoration, which she was more than happy to do. Meanwhile, as Lilith and Natsume walked around town, Natsume was unsure what to talk about, so she tried looking up information on her phone but couldn't find anything useful. When she spotted a shop selling crepes, she tried to go buy some, but she tripped and hurt her nose in the process. Lilith hopped her to an empty park bench and then offered her a handkerchief to wipe her bloody nose. Natsume then tried to apologize for her behavior the past few days, but Lilith beat her to it. She thanked her for taking her out and then suggested they enjoy the rest of the day together, which they did. On their way home that evening, surprised Natsume by giving her hairpins, so Natsume gave Lilith her Christmas present and told her she would be leaving soon. When they got home, everywhere was dark, but the next moment the place lit up, causing Natsume to stare in awe. However, she noticed Lilith wasn't by her side, so she rushed into the house to find her, only to discover this is the one time in life she gets to give main character energy. The party she thought was for Lilith turned out to be for her because Yuri had felt guilty about lying to Lilith, so he told her about the party. Lilith had been the one to suggest they throw the party for Natsume, and they were glad it worked out just fine. Natsume was grateful for the surprise, but when Fujisaki asked how she was doing, she became scared. Fortunately, Tsukasa saved the situation by inviting everyone to gather around the table, and they all enjoyed the party together. After the party, Fujisaki carried a sleeping Tsukasa in her arms and thanked Yuri for inviting them over before leaving. A little while later, Yuri and Lilith left the gift Yuri made for Natsume on the table beside her as she slept. Now that the party was over, Lilith was cleaning up after everyone's mess like a dutiful maid when she heard the doorbell rang and went to answer it because no one does anything around here. To her surprise, it was her former employer, so she invited him and offered him some tea while they discussed. Meanwhile, Yuri and Natsume left the store with the things Lilith had sent them out to buy, and Natsume complained the whole time. Yuri reminded her that she'd chosen to go shopping because she didn't want to clean up the house, so she kept quiet. She then thanked him for teaching her how to express her feelings and surprised him by saying she would confess her feelings to her master when she got home. At the mansion, Lilith apologized to her former master for suddenly going MIA and explained her reasons for doing so to make him understand. She told him that after her parents had passed away, none of her relatives wanted her. Yuri's parents, who had been friends with her parents, were the ones who stepped up and took her in. She had felt a bit uncomfortable with them, but because they were so kind and welcoming, she was able to relax. The first night she spent in the mansion was the day she met Yuri because he approached her while she stood on the balcony. His curious eyes had found hers, so she tried to hide them because she felt ashamed, but Yuri surprised her by complimenting her eyes. After living with them for a year, she requested that they allow her to enroll at the Academy for Maids, as it was the only way she could think of repaying them for their kindness. A few years later, she began working at his estate, but when she heard about Yuri's parents' death, she left everything and rushed back home to support him. Soon after she finished her story, Yuri and Natsume returned home, and they were surprised to see the man. Natsume asked why he had come, and he said he came to take her back home, and as expected, she grumbled. Since Yuri had no idea who he was, Lilith introduced him as her former employer. Upon hearing this, Yuri immediately assumed that he'd come to take Lilith back, so he jumped over the couch and went to stand in front of her. He told the man that he wouldn't let him take Lilith away as she was his maid, causing the man to laugh. He assured Yuri that he hadn't come to take Lilith, and that made him feel relieved. With the issue sorted out, the man told Lilith that he and Natsume would take their leave, so Yuri and Lilith bid them farewell. Before they left, the man asked Yuri to take care of Lilith and promised to let Natsume visit from time to time. Later that evening, during dinner, things between Lilith and Yuri were a bit awkward because they hadn't been alone since the day he confessed his feelings. This made Lilith suggest they go somewhere the next day, and Yuri became very excited with the idea of going on a date with Lilith. The next day, as Yuri and Lilith walked to town, she stopped to give him a little twirl and show off her new dress. She admitted she'd worn it because of their date, and Yuri told her that she looked beautiful, which made her blush. As they continued walking, Lilith suggested they go to a cafe to get some hot chocolate, and Yuri agreed. On their way to the cafe, Tsukasa, who was complaining to Fujisaki about not wanting to attend her piano lessons, spotted them. She tried to convince Fujisaki to let her follow them, but Fujisaki refused to let her do so. Later at the cafe, while Yuri and Lilith enjoyed their drinks, Yuri told her there was somewhere he wanted to visit. The place turned out to be his parents' grave, and as they stood side by side, Yuri admitted he'd been scared to come there. However, being with Lilith had given him courage, which was why he had insisted they visit and say hello to them. Before walking away, they placed 2 roses on the grave, and Lilith promised to take care of Yuri on their behalf. On their way home that evening, the Christmas lights adorning the trees made Lilith's eyes sparkle, so Yuri complimented her. While they talked about how much fun they were having together, Yuri took Lilith's hand in his. The next moment, it began to snow, and Lilith decided it was a good time to ask Yuri how he truly felt about her. Yuri told her he wasn't sure what kind of love he felt for her, but said he wanted to find out as their relationship progressed. Satisfied with his answer, she told him that his confession had startled her, but admitted that she wasn't sure how to respond to it. Yuri told her not to rush and reminded her that they had a lot of time to figure things out. They then continued on their way home, chatting happily about everything and nothing at the same time. The next morning, Yuri woke up to find everywhere covered in snow, so he went outside to build a snowman. Upon getting there, he saw that Lilith had already made one, so he built one that resembled her. When Lilith joined him outside, he made some snowman kids, saying they were a family, and when he finished, Lilith noticed his hands were cold. She tried to warm them up with her breath, but Yuri noticed her hands were cold as well. However, the touch made him feel warmer, and when he told Lilith, she suggested they go inside to warm up.